Now here in Lviv, the city is enveloped in gloom tonight, as you can see, with almost all the lights turned out in case of an attack. And we too are using much dimmer lights. The morning began with satellite images of massive Russian troop movements, a column of artillery and tanks reportedly 40 miles long, heading towards the capital, Kyiv. While President Putin seems determined to intensify his military assault, Ukraine's President Zelensky addressed the European Parliament by video link, telling Europe that his country was paying the ultimate price to defend freedom. His speech received a standing ovation. But Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, said again today that NATO would not impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And a warning, there are distressing scenes in my report. The footage is mute, but you can imagine the sound. What you might not be able to imagine is the aftermath of a single Russian airstrike on the Ukrainian government offices in Kharkiv. The man on the stretcher is one of 10 who didn't make it. 35 were injured. He walks out on Independence Square, rechristened after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that's the point. Russia is trying to do to a whole country what it's done to this place. Wipe it off the map. Erase its borders and identity. We've seen white helmets before, of course, as well as this indiscriminate destruction from the skies. In rebel-held areas of Syria, Aleppo. There the Russians used their bombs to keep the Assad regime in power. Here they're using their bombs to get rid of a democratically elected government. And now it's Kyiv's turn. This was the panoramic view of the capital's television tower. Every window is an eye on the city's impending doom and on the bitter ironies of history. That park below is Babi Yar, a sacred memorial ground for the 33,000 Jews, communists and Ukrainian nationalists slaughtered here by the Nazis. This was the view from the ground. Imagine the panic and fear when the sky is your enemy. 5 were killed here. And there's more to come, much more. These are satellite images of a line of Russian tanks, 40 miles long. And these are the Russian helicopters in place for a full-scale attack on the capital. The only solution here are NATO airstrikes, and they are being ruled out. But as Boris Johnson discovered today, that doesn't diminish the outrage.
Because NATO is afraid of a World War III, but it is already started. And these are Ukrainian children who are there taking the hit. You're talking about more sanctions, Prime Minister, but Roman Abramovich is not sanctioned. He's in London. His children are not in the bombardments. His children are there in London. Putin's children are in Netherlands, in Germany, in mansions. Where are all these mansions seized? I don't see that. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't know where to run. This is what is happening, Prime Minister.
Look, I just want to say that I'm acutely conscious that there is not enough that we can do as the UK government to help in the way that you want. And I've got to be honest about that.
There is, however, no shortage of gestures. The European Parliament today mustered a standing ovation for the President zoomed in from his bunker.
Доведіть, що ви разом з нами. Доведіть, що ви нас не відпускаєте. Доведіть, що ви дійсно європейці. І тоді життя переможе смерть, а світ темряву. Слава Україні!
They voted to fast-track Ukraine's urgent application for EU membership, but it's not their call, so this too was a gesture. At the UN in Geneva, they were also standing up, but this time to walk out. This was the Human Rights Council with a session on disarmament of all things, and the Russian foreign minister used it to lecture the West.
Высокомерный, опирающийся на чувство собственного превосходства, исключительности и вседозволенности философии Запада, должен быть положен конец.
But the lecture of a regime that feels more sinned against than sinning was lost on the empty chairs. Talk of geopolitics and the clash of civilizations is probably lost on these babushki trying to secure lunch at the train station turned refugee camp in Lviv. Or the children momentarily distracted by something sweet. Or on Linnell, who's been living on this bench for 4 days after fleeing her home, but still insists on putting on makeup. Or on this group of Indian students from Gujarat who've been studying here for 4 years and call this place home. No one here wants to leave, but they're all desperate to get out, to flee the coming storm. They are all citizens of somewhere, trapped in a nightmare from a bygone era. And then there's Dimitri, the IT guy who's just dropped off his diabetic mother on her way to Poland and is now returning to get a gun and fight the war. He may not know how to shoot, but he has a secret weapon. It's called hatred.
Ukrainian men are very, very angry, and we will kill every Russian soldier we put our hands on. You can be sure about that.
They were probably never interested in war, but war is now very interested in them. Well, let's speak now live to the activist Daria Koleniuk, who you saw in our report. She is still in the Polish capital, Warsaw. Daria, thank you very much for joining us. I think what you said today in such an emotional way really summed up how many people, especially in Ukraine, feel. But just tell me, were you planning to say this to the Prime Minister, or were you seized by the moment?
It's an accident that I appeared at that press conference, and I just wanted to say something what my people, my friends, my family members in Ukraine are not able to say to him. So I'm glad that he thinks that Ukrainian people are standing up. They are brave. We are brave. We are standing up. But we cannot fight the evil of Kremlin and the evil of new Hitler, Putin alone. We need protection. We need engagement of the West, but not on the border, from the western side of border with Ukraine, on the safe side of NATO. We need engagement in Ukraine. And that was my call.
And you also spoke very emotionally, of course, about the fact that there are still mansions owned by Russians in, the posh parts of London. There are still the oligarchs' kids going to private schools. Putin's kids live in the Netherlands. What do you actually want there to be done? Do you want them to be thrown out and sent back to Russia? Do you want the mansions to be closed down?
I want all oligarchs and political elites of Kremlin, as well as their family members, to be sanctioned. Not all of them are sanctioned yet, just a few. Their family members are not touched. I want their family members, including children, to be kicked off of the NATO member states. And the reason for that is because Ukrainian children now, who have the most severe diseases in the hospitals, are now hiding in the basements and hiding from Russian missiles. And today I asked Boris Johnson, do something with protecting our sky. And he responded, I can't do no-fly zone over Ukraine. But why? If you can't do no-fly zone, what is the alternative? NATO has the air defense system, which can hit Russian missiles. Don't call it NATO no-fly zone. Call it something different, but simply protect our sky from these missiles and from the bombs, which are bombing our hospitals, our infrastructure, everything, and let at least these children to evacuate from Ukraine through this green corridor speedily to the European Union.
But the reason why they probably won't impose the no-fly zone is that this would bring about a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. And that's the problem here, that I think leaders in the West, and indeed the publics that elected them, are not ready to take that risk, however awful that sounds.
I have two answers to this. First answer is that we've already heard this fairy tale, that leaders were not going to go into the direct confrontation with Russia by shutting down Nord Stream 2, by imposing sanctions on Russia, despite all possible alerts and going public that the attack on Ukraine will be imminent. So they knew about that. UK and the US intelligence knew that there will be devastation war, but they didn't impose sanctions before these troops were collected. This is the first thing. And the second thing, Ukraine has 4 nuclear power plants and plus one shut Ukraine nuclear power plant in Chernobyl. Chernobyl is already seized by Russians. we have 4 more nuclear power plants. They are one of the largest in Europe. So imagine Russian missiles hitting any of these nuclear power plants, and NATO will not protect. And all this radiation will go without borders. So it's the imminent threat now to NATO, and NATO has obligation now to do something. And in addition to that, Ukraine gave up all nuclear arsenal under the guarantees of the security guarantees from the UK, from the US, and from Russia, that in case somebody will invade us, there will be support, there will be help. So one of the guarantors invaded us and is killing our children, and 2 other guarantors are gathering in Poland and the border and saying, we can't help you, sorry.
Right. I know, it's a very depressing situation. Daria Kaleniuk, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Well, today our international editor and her team set off from the city of Dnipro in the east and headed west to Uman. That city is under curfew tonight. And Lindsay Hilsum joins us now from the basement of her hotel, which is the only place that she can broadcast from safely. Lindsay.
Matt, as you can see, I'm in an underground car park. There's some rather nice Soviet-era classic cars behind me. Now, Uman, this town, is under complete blackout, and that's why we're here, because the authorities said to us, you know, you can't put your lights up. This town was attacked on the first night. It was a military target, but 1 person was killed. And it has been attacked again, I think, yesterday. Again, a military target. It's an interesting place. It's a center for Jewish pilgrimages, and there are many Israeli citizens here who will be trying to evacuate now. Now, in the hotel, I've just got chatting to a lot of people. Look, they're coming from all over, trying to get out of the country. I talked to a family of young women from Kharkiv. The little girl, her school had been hit by a bomb. One of the girls had already got to Slovakia. The others, well, I said, well, where are you going? They said, well, we don't really know. We'll wake up tomorrow and try and work it out. And you think this is the flotsam and jetsam of war. People who just don't know where they're going. They just pick up and go. The other thing that they said was that they had family in Mariupol. Now, that is south and east, and that has been one of the places where fighting has been worst. And they were really worried because there's no longer any mobile phone connection with there. There's also no heat, no light, no electricity. It's very hard to find out what's going on there. We also met people from Zaporizhia, somewhere where we were a couple of days ago. Apparently the bombing there was very intense last night. And I met a young man who told me that he and other people who worked in the engineering works where he did, which was hit last night, 12 cars of them came out today. I asked him where he would go, and he said he was going to try and go to Dusseldorf in Germany. Now, this was really interesting because he said that his wife, and therefore his son, were Jewish. And this is a big thing, particularly here in this place of pilgrimage, but also today, as you've reported, they hit the television tower in Kiev, but it also hit very near a major important Jewish massacre site from World War II, Baba Yar. 33,000 Jews killed there in 1941. Someone said to me, by hitting it, it was as if the Jews had been killed twice. History never goes in this place. President Putin says that one of the reasons he's intervened is in order to denazify this country. What nonsense. The president is Jewish. This is a place where Jews do feel safe. And this is the strangeness of history, Matt. That young man, I said, where would he and his wife, Jewish, feel safe now? And he said, well, Germany is the best place for us. History never forgets Ukraine or Europe, does it?
Lindsay Hilsum, stay safe, stay underground. Thanks very much indeed. Now, Alexander Danylyuk was Ukraine's finance minister and served as its national security chief in 2019. I interviewed him a short time ago, and I started by asking him about the ability of Ukrainian forces to confront what appears to be a second wave of Russian attacks.
In terms of the capabilities, obviously you can be never perfectly prepared, but we are where we are, but we are in pretty good shape. There is a quite strong military presence within the city, including territorial, top up with territorial defense. You know, well, that would offer Kremlin a very strong resistance that they actually never expected to get. Whenever they go any city, they attack in Ukraine, they actually meet a very strong resistance. The same resistance will be in Kyiv, but Kyiv is much larger. There is more military and territorial defense personnel there. People are very committed, so it will not be an easy target for Russians.
Right, but despite your commitment and resilience, there's not an awful lot that Ukrainian forces on the ground can do about Russian air power, is there?
Well, the air power is a big threat. Obviously, anti-aircraft defense system is working and it's shooting planes, helicopters, but obviously that continuous airstrikes continue to be a big threat. That's why the president is asking to introduce to close the airspace, right? No-fly zone. Unfortunately, that decision wasn't taken yet on the pretext, which is kind of, you may understand that, NATO thinks that by introducing no-fly zone, it will pretty much will join the war with Russia. I see it totally differently. When you close the space, right, and Russians have options not to fly, right? It's not like we, taking some rights from them. They're on our territory. So they basically won't be able to fly.
But whoever starts that war, the point is that there will be war between NATO and Russia, and that is something that certainly the NATO leaders are very keen to avoid, however unfair that may be to Ukrainians on the ground.
If Ukraine falls, which I don't believe would ever happen, right? But the NATO countries will be next. And so that's why Ukraine needs to be defended. And by the way, when I'm thinking about Ukrainians who are losing their lives in these bombardments, and may and will unfortunately lose their lives in the future, because Russia is only in the second wave would be much stronger than the first one. So obviously everyone in Europe and the world should think about our lives of civilians, of defenders as well, and do everything possible to protect them.
I just want to ask you about the weapons that the West has been supplying. Is there any evidence that those weapons are actually getting through to the places where they're needed?
Oh yes, at the moment they're actually being trained to use one of them.
Oh, really? Which one?
An interesting one. It's getting through. It's putting in use. It's putting in use immediately, and some of these equipment been destroyed already by this weapon. So what I want to say is that these supplies already saved a lot of lives and helped to stop Russia advancement.
You must be completely exhausted by what's going on, and we're only on day 6 of this war.
That's okay. Unfortunately, it's not the last day of the war. We need to understand that it is going to last. It's going to last, and we need to get ready to go through this marathon.
Alexander Daniluk, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck. Stay safe.
Thank you. Good luck.
Now, many claim that the Russian invasion is not going to plan, but few know what exactly that plan is supposed to be. The Russian military has been making progress from the south, but on the north and eastern fronts, the fighting is grindingly attritional and has seen the use by Russia of more indiscriminatory munitions like heavy artillery and multiple launch rockets and cluster bombs. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, has been examining the day's events and the battlefield.
An invasion on 3 fronts by north, east and south. This is Bucha, just north of Kyiv. A sense here of the resistance the long Russian armoured columns are meeting as they grind slowly south. A week of blood and still not beyond the outer suburbs of the capital. Bodies of soldiers lie where they fell. Today Moscow admitted for the first time it is taking considerable casualties.
Хай живе Україна, Україна переможе, Путіну гаплик. Зупинимо. Ми його не тільки зупинимо, ми його уничтожимо.
Ukrainians are being killed and injured probably on a far greater scale. In Brovary Hospital, across the Dnieper River from Kyiv, the wards and the mortuary are filling.
Після вибуху на блокпосту до нас одночасно поступило 6, потім ще 2 пацієнтів.
To the eastern front, Donetsk, where Putin invaded 8 years ago, called our bluff and won. Once more, lives and buildings smashed in the invasion Moscow promised wouldn't happen, the West believed couldn't happen.
Сгорел полностью дом. У нас все, вон мы как пострадали. Когда все это закончится?
You can't just fight a war, you have to sell it. After 6 days of losing the propaganda campaign, Moscow's woken up. Russian Defense Ministry now releasing footage of its troops fighting. But no place, no time, no details beyond what it called a special operation, hitting targets in Ukraine. If Russian soldiers were told to expect bouquets, they got blockades. This, Kupiansk, near Kharkiv in the east. Down on the southern coast, Melitopol. Russia's taken the town, but holding it, controlling it. The main government building in Kharkiv, pulverized by a missile strike in the heart of Ukraine's second largest city. It remains the center of the most intense fighting.
В результаті артобстрілу була частково зруйнована будівля облдержадміністрації, прилеглих будівель. Зруйнована сходова клітина, під завалами знаходяться люди, щонайменше вилучено рятувальниками 6 чоловік, близько 20 чоловік поранених.
In Kherson, down on the Black Sea coast, another tower block takes a direct hit. And today's Moscow denial about targeting civilian buildings came from the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu.
Российская армия не оккупирует украинскую территорию, принимает все меры для сохранения жизни и безопасности мирных жителей. Подчеркну, что удары наносятся только по военным объектам и исключительно высокоточным оружием.
The cold-blooded reality is, of course, that if Ukrainian forces use civilian cover, they will be targets with obvious consequences. North, east and south, the red areas, those seized by Russia after 6 days now. Let's go north first, where that 40-mile armoured column moves slowly south towards the capital Kiev, capable of laying siege to it. East, the second occupied zone, including the second city, Kharkiv, where the heaviest urban fighting has taken place. South again along the eastern border with Russia to the Donbass area, long partially occupied by Russia. And then to the southern occupied zone, from Crimea up into Ukraine and east, the town of Melitopol, seized by Russia now. Clearly the objective will be to link up all these zones, and in the south that would give Moscow a 150-mile land corridor, a bridge from Crimea to Russia itself. And tonight Russia's defense minister Igor Konashenkov claimed that southern objective has been achieved. So in the country of their neighbours, cousins, brothers and sisters sometimes, Russian ground forces pause. The peace talks will reconvene in the coming days, but the focus for civilians and soldiers of both sides remains firmly on fighting, doing it or escaping from it.
Alex Thompson reporting there. Well, this war has been documented on social media like no other. Russia's attacks from the land and air filmed on mobile phones everywhere. In the last hour, more dramatic footage, apparently of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city under heavy bombardment. Well, the glut of material emerging online from all corners of the country has already been used for intelligence, propaganda, and perhaps later for evidence of war crimes. Paul McNamara has been looking at the onslaught launched by Russia on Ukraine's second city.
The attack on Kharkiv is perhaps the most dramatic demonstration of Russian firepower yet, striking a government building in the heart of this city, a city of 1.5 million people. But what does this tell us about the war? Well, firstly, it gives us some insight into the weapons being used. This missile moves fast, but slow the footage down and zoom in, you can see what appear to be fins halfway down the body. As it continues down, you get an indication of the size. Experts believe this is likely to be a Caliber cruise missile. These are new. First used in 2015, can carry up to ½ ton of high explosive, and which Russia used extensively in Syria. But other pictures from social media, which we verified, tell a more worrying story, like what other missiles are being used. This is the tail of a rocket embedded in the ground outside the Red Cross in Kharkiv. Now, a number of these rockets have landed across Ukraine with no explosions, leading many to conclude they're duds. They're not. In fact, this is the empty casing, say weapons experts. It's actually the end of this, a Russian missile, a cluster bomb, they say, that releases bomblets high in the sky, leaving the empty shell to land further away.
But we call these wide area effects weapons, and it's usually going to cause more damage than just the place it's hitting. Unfortunately, history shows that the likely outcome of this type of bombing and strikes of urban areas is that it's going to look like they're flattening the entire city.
Most Western nations have signed a treaty banning these sorts of weapons. One nation that has not signed up, though, Russia. And so the UK's Ministry of Defence most recent assessment, more indiscriminate bombing, many more civilian casualties.
Paul McNamara there. And later in the programme, we'll have more from inside the city of Kharkiv and the people living among the falling missiles.
Now, one of the first places to come under attack in the whole of Ukraine was Vasilik, which is 30 miles south of Kyiv, the capital. It was attacked at first by rockets and later paratroopers because of a military airfield nearby. Well, joining me now is Natalia Balasinovich, the mayor of Vasilik. I hope I've pronounced the name of your town correctly, Mayor. I'm sorry if I didn't. But tell me about the situation today, because you're very close to Kyiv and there's been a lot of fighting reported nearby.
Good evening. Today the situation is a bit quiet than yesterday, but I will explain you why Vasilik is a very strategic place for Russian army to attack it. Because we have the 6 military bases in Vasilik, and we have the airport, military airport. That's why Russian troops, they want to attack the airport with the rockets, and already they did it during 4 days. It really looks like the hell. Now our main street, the best college for students in Kyiv region is completely destroyed by bomb. It was day before yesterday. Yesterday night, during attacks by rockets, was destroyed multi-flats, 5-floor building full of people, also in our main streets on the city. Our town is situated in 20 kilometers from Kyiv, and our militaries are very strong. We believe them, we support them, and life really, it's very difficult now, because it's not the military operation. They are killing a lot of civils. They are killing us.
But we are also witnessing sorry to interrupt. We're also witnessing today the encirclement of the capital Kyiv by Russian forces. Have you seen any evidence of that?
They will never enter Kyiv, and they will never, and we will never give our town Vasilik, because we already see that our enemy, it's not strong enough to attack airport, and our all civil people give a huge support. And territorial forces also we formed during 1 week. It's strong enough to support to our army. It's I think that the enemy have to find another way to go to Kyiv, but not Vasilik. But I'm sure Kyiv and Vasilik and all other Ukrainian towns and cities will be always under yellow-blue flag, and there is no way. We don't want Russia. We are Ukrainian. We have our own...
Sorry, Natalia, to interrupt. I just want to get one more question in, if I may. I gather your cousin is a Belarusian paratrooper, so he could be fighting on the other side of this conflict.
Yes, that's true. And you know, the problem of our country is that all of us, we were Soviet Union. For example, my grandfather, he was Russian, and he came to Ukraine to study in military college, and he married Ukrainian. From another part of family, my cousin, he live in Belarus, and he's in Belarusian army. And as all of you know, that now Lukashenko president decided to go together with Russia. So really all of us are shocked how it's one family, all the childhood we spent together, and they will attack us. So we call all mothers, don't let your sons to go to kill us.
Natalia, that's a very emotional note to end on. Thank you very much indeed for your interview. Natalia Basalinovich, the mayor of Vasilkiv, I think I got that right.
Yes,
thank you so much indeed, and best of luck to you, and please stay safe.